Good morning once again. We are back on Pan-African Friday with today's episode of the Pan-African discussions that we'll be going through in the next 2 hours as we look at issues that are affecting Africans, issues on the African continent and beyond Africa. And today, it's not a surprise, but we also in the house have a guest who many people have been asking me to bring back. The last time we had him was on Zoom, but today is live, and at an appropriate time, I will bring him to you and the usual panelists that are in the house today. We are looking at the issues of Africa. The other time, last week, we were looking at the elections in Zimbabwe. We were looking at the other elections that the African countries have had in the last 1 or 2 years now, and the ramifications that have come out from those elections. And the last one we were discussing was actually Zimbabwe, where we had a number of disputes over that election. And we're also wondering what is happening with these elections in Africa, because whenever we have had these elections, we have had issues coming up, issues of rigging, issues of transparency, issues of all this compounded. Is it because we are having a system that we have copied from elsewhere, but even if we copied it, can't we make it better to work for us? So some of the issues we looked at last week. Today, we'll be looking at African engagement in the other global agencies. We have Africa joining in the G20. We have Africa joining now in the G77, the meeting ongoing in Havana. We have Africa in many other agencies. But what is our stake, and what is the future of Africa in all this, and of course the benefits? But like I said, today in the house I have Ndugu Garama, the Pan-African, who is always on this forum. I have Ndugu Irumba, who is also a Pan-African. But above all, we have a guest, Ndugu Maponga. Now, last time I said, if you're in Uganda, it would have been the other B, Mavonga, not Maponga. But it's Africa for you. And Ndugu Joshua Maponga comes to us all the way from the southern part of Africa. He's a Pan-Africanist, and has made a number of presentations, a number of shows, and a very respected African, but also has had issues with the people who otherwise do not wish the best for Africa. And in our deliberations today, we will see some of those issues come up. Now, as usual, we begin our program with what has happened, what we have seen happen, because using different lenses, seeing what has been happening on this beautiful continent of ours of Africa. And to do so, I'll begin with the Ndugu Irumba to just a synopsis, a glimpse of what you have seen happen of interest on this continent of Africa.
First of all, let me take this singular honor to welcome our comrade, our senior Pan-Africanist, Bishop Joshua Maponga, into the Pearl of Africa. And it's always a pleasure, my senior comrade, having you here. I want to tell you that you're more popular here than Mr. Daniel Garama and Irumba combined.
I think that.
In good.
The last time we were discussing with the Ndugu Maponga was to do, I think, what caught us that time, because Uganda had just passed the bill on the anti-homosexual law. And Ndugu Maponga has had issues with this kind of stuff, wherever he has been, not later on in his home country.
He has been vocal against
a number of people who we now, we used to think they are friends of Africa, but we now discover they're actually the best enemies of Africa. So, and many Ugandans and other people who are watching us from across the globe were saying, I think that's what the information we need to pass to the West. Thank God you are here today.
So, that having said, I think for the last couple of days, for me, I am continuing to celebrate what's happening in the west part of Africa, in Asia, and so on. And we have had quite a number of engagements with our senior elder here, Bishop Maponga, about now the relevance. Some people even are saying this is not illegal. We are simply having a different revolution in our times, if you realize what is happening now. And of course, Comrade Rugarama, you know that ECOWAS had wanted to start saying something, but
to do something.
but
for me, on that one, I would have supported them to do so, and I think many Africans would have done so. But when finally someone else started to say that I'm also coming to help you, if you are coming to help me sort my issues with my brother in our compound, when we know the other time you stole our goat, then we are safer not involving you in this one.
Exactly. so that's the element, and I think that's what is interesting for me. People in Africa are beginning to differentiate between an illegitimate coup and a pro-people revolution, call it. I don't want to use the word coup again. And on this scenario now for the West African countries that have recently undergone that kind of revolution. So they are beginning to make a difference. But yes, even in the law, there is a legal killing when you kill someone. And they say it is legal, especially if you are in self-defense mode, and you kill someone. The courts can agree with you that it was inevitable. So I think that's what is happening in parts of Africa, and I realize that we should actually embrace them. Number two is of the good comments that are coming from some of our African presidents, especially William Ruto here. William Ruto has of recent made very significant statements that we need to start giving attention to, with the idea of starting to adopt some of those ideas, especially when it comes to single currency for Africa. You know, someone says, I'm dealing with Mr. Rugarama here, we are all Ugandans, but he wants me to pay him in dollars. Someone is asking, how does the dollar come in? So those are some of the ideas I picked over the week, Comrade Mututa.
Okay, that's great. A number of things have happened. And we are saying, I think one of the problems of Africa is talking about the single currency, and because whoever has talked about it has ended up badly. And we hope that the Honorable, His Excellency Ruto doesn't go that way. But someone has to say something. Even if you kept quiet, if you are to be killed, you'll be killed anyway.
Even when you keep quiet, you have said something.
Exactly. Ndogo Rugarama.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mututa. I take this singular honor to, first and foremost, for yet another time welcome my brother, Comrade Bishop Joshua Maponga Marara III. It is of very, very critical importance for our audience to know that those who have been following the Pan-African cause on all the forums that you would want to mention here, Comrade Maponga is one man that has sacrificed the better part of his life so far, and we are proud to associate ourselves with him to the Pan-African cause. He has, in great depth, analyzed the attack to the African culture by the colonialist and now the imperialist, same person, more or less. And we don't have many of his type. Now, I want to rest that one at that because he will speak for himself, but I thought it important to say it because that's what I feel.
Sure.
Now, secondly, I have observed, rather with a lot of sadness, the type of politicking that we seem to have gone back to in Uganda. And I'm one of those who are celebrating the police coming in and stopping these rallies. I don't want to be politically correct, so that when I move outside and these happy, rather not so ideologically grounded people, you will forgive my language, thank me for having spoken ill of the government. Certain things must not be allowed to happen. And I think that the politics of lensed with the intonations of tribalism and sectarianism are things of the past. That not only the Osejefoa, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, by 1963 with his contemporaries then, were against when they were calling for the unification of Africa. But even progressive, subsequent progressive governments thereafter on the African continent, especially this particular government, NRM, in their 10-point program and 15-point program, purposed to do away with. What that means, therefore, is that this week, to me, the police coming up and saying, we have observed that with this kind of trend, we may be risking the future of this present generation and the next generation, and therefore, let us review and move properly.
Thank you.
Thought it was one of the best episodes unfolding within the week.
Asante ndugu Rugarama, and we will now hear from our brother ndugu Bishop Maponga Joshua, who comes to us, I think, from Zimbabwe, to be specific, of the southern part of this great continent of Africa, telling us through how he has seen, what he has seen happen of significance on this continent of Africa, particularly this week.
This week was interesting for me. I had Joburg, Harare, Kenya, and Uganda, and by tonight I'll be in Joburg. Tomorrow I should be in Swaziland. This is Eswatini. The trend that we want
that's too much to know anything happening.
I know it firsthand.
Maybe Joshua will also comment about Eswatini entertaining Taiwan. If it will, over to you.
Very interesting. And I think the real idea at the core of this, what we are fighting against, less than politics, we are fighting with what I might want to call African nationhood. At the center of it.
Statehood of Africa.
We are fragmented as families. I hear you talking about brothers fighting, and the neighbor who stole a goat coming to settle.
Yeah.
It looks like brothers up to now, they have not yet agreed who stole the goat.
Sure.
You know, and yet we are asking the very same people again to come and settle our disputes. Successful countries always identify their enemies, and they're clear about their enemies.
Sure.
So at the center of this conversation of nationhood is what I might want to call sovereignty. When we say a country is independent and a country is free, a country is now no longer in oppression, maybe we need to stand back and ask, how much freedom do free countries have? Because what we've come to see now is that they give you freedom as just two things, a piece of cloth and a small little piece of paper, which they call a poem or a national anthem. Those are the two things that you have as a country. The constitution at the bottom remains colonial with very few changes. Basically, our governments now have come into power to manage the system that was built by the colonialists.
Sure.
So how you do your medicine, whether indigenous medicine is allowed or not, still is in question. Who carries minerals in the country, still is in question. How do we travel around the continent? Still in question. Which money do we use as we travel? Still in question. Can you imagine when you want to send money from Uganda to Kenya, you need a SWIFT code that must take the money via New York?
Yes.
And then it comes back to
Exactly.
Kenya. But whereas you are just across the river here on the same Nelubale Lake, why can't we just? So has Africa started thinking of building instruments of transactions amongst ourselves? BRICS has come up with its own password for payment. America has its SWIFT. Africa is not there. So I want to maybe look at the global space and say this issue of BRICS, no, I'm not excited. It is a temporary solution to a permanent problem. The permanent problem is, will Africa ever have its own currency? Before we can be joining either World Bank, Eurodollar, or dollar itself, or we're joining the BRICS.
Exactly.
Number two, you come to this thing of now taking the powerful amongst us. You remove South Africa, you move Egypt, then you move Nigeria, and you make them part of this BRICS. Now, you've already weakened the strongest amongst us. By the time we want to unite as Africans, these big boys who are now in bed with other people, will they find it easy to walk away from there and come this side? So my suggestion was, before we can talk about BRICS, we needed an African currency.
Yes.
And we can only build an African currency when you have one African stock exchange, where all our resources and minerals are being sold at world standard, so that each country can benefit fully from its own resources. Having built that one currency concept, then we can begin to talk about empowerment. So the G20, the United Nations, all these big organizations, which were not formed by us, in my own view, I beg to be corrected, they tend to take some amongst us and then they move us in private corners and say, yeah, you are better. You are not like the rest of them. See, your country is much better. South African space, we might find that being very exaggerated, to a result that a fellow South African feels like his own mother and uncle from Mozambique and Zimbabwe are less than him, because he has a South African passport, his own grandfather and father have Malawian passports, and you think that you can actually go on rampage of eliminating your own cousins and uncles because of a different passport. So at the center of this, the autonomy of Africa will never be achieved by individual countries. The autonomy of Africa will be achieved by a unified continent. Then brothers across the rivers can benefit from each other. If we just unleash the borders only, we'll be able to flow through our borders not less than $3 to $5 trillion.
Sure. Within the few days past, we was on the same point, and of course we are talking about Africa in the G, whatever G, we now have a number of Gs.
No, which was an A54.
Exactly.
Which is Africa in 54 countries.
Yeah.
But you're talking about G20.
Yeah. We are not even talking about the G of the African continent. Now, you realize that South Africa, for example, has been enjoying the privileges, if there are any anyway, within G20. But for when Africa now is accepted, admitted as a member of the G20, South Africa has been there for quite some time. You realize there was some kind of discomfort about South Africa now, thinking maybe it's going to lose its position on the African continent. But also, you look at most of these groupings, Gs, you realize that Africa is going in either as an observer or as by the way, or a few
bystander.
Oh yeah, or a few of the African countries that have been picked to sit with the big boys now, and then they begin looking at Africa as per that. But is it possible that Africa can sit and talk within itself? And why? Because the question is not even if, but why are we not able to do this? The other time we were discussing an issue of, and actually it was raised by the president of the Republic of Uganda, when Tripoli was under attack by NATO, specifically by France and its cousins. And the President Museveni is on record having said that he wanted to call South Africa, but then it was President Zuma to say that, can we do something to stop these people from attacking Tripoli? But also at the same time, when the heads of state of Africa were on the plane to go and negotiate, they were told, please go back. And they had to go back. Where is the problem? Is it because we normally disagree with Maindugu here, Rugarama saying the invisible hand of the colonial is still there? Is it the invisible hand that is failing us to come together and have these G-African countries together for a common good of Africa?
It is now visible, it is no longer invisible.
But while we're on that, I think maybe we need to start talking seriously and be frank about certain issues, particularly pertaining to war. War is business.
Sure.
Of the highest order. So every time you hear a bullet going off there is a banker.
Some dollar.
There's a banker behind that who is actually signing some checks. I'm sorry to say this, it might sound very rude and crude, but all, if not most, of the presidents and government officials that we have, they are custodians of those that have financial interests in the policies that the government must implement. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
When you hear of the lobbyists that are in America who sit in the shadows, you're talking about green energy, they tell you, no, we're too much invested in that. Don't touch that. You want to build, no, you can't do that. And the president of a country is on record of America saying, well, I can't help myself, I'm following orders. Whoever is giving those orders. So I think it's time people look behind every curtain, whether it is a party, political party, or opposition party. You always want to find out who are the financiers of these organizations. Because once you understand who are the financiers, you'll understand exactly what you're dealing with. Because these are caretakers that we have in the front.
Sure.
So when you begin to talk about Libya and talk about African countries, what is the problem? What is the problem? The problem is that we have caretaker presidents who we are friends today and we're taking pictures together on United Nations. And we're hugging each other. Then tomorrow morning you hear that Rugarama, they're going to be attacking him. And you forget that you were brothers. You can't even say, gentlemen, Rugarama must be. But I've seen something interesting on the Niger one. This president who was ousted out, now he's making a call. Please, guys, come and make some noise. Come and help me. But he has been in power for 50 years.
I'm not making noise. Exactly.
And Gaddafi died in his ears.
Yes.
Sankara and the Lumumbas and the Joshua Nkomos and etc. 50 years ago, Zimbabwe was still in war, and their country was in power. Did you ever say to them, make some noise?
Or did you make noise?
Please go and protect the Magufuli. Make some noise. You know, go and protect the brothers. So we have no camaraderie that is honest.
Sure. So this issue of making noise, I think shouldn't be, wait until it happens to you. The noise should have been made earlier. But in Nduguru Garama last time, on the same issue about your invisible hand, you are saying something.
Yeah, absolutely. I concur with Comrade Maponga. One thing is for a fact that even when we talk about the G77, yes, and the non-aligned movement, you will find that in our struggle of the less powerful to get together and get themselves out of the shackles that they have been in for such a long time and still probably are in up to now, it will not be that easy. Why? Because we have got the powers in whose interest it is to keep us in that particular state. For instance, in interrogating the non-aligned movement, right from when the likes of the senior comrades, Titos, the Abdul Gamar, of that time, the Dr. Kwame Nkrumahs, by the 1961, the Nehru, India, when they were coming up with that organization, in the heat of the Cold War, certainly there were sides, the USSR and America, of course America with her cousins. What are the registered successes so far? Because you have also to look at the objectives. See, what were the objectives upon which the non-aligned movement was established? And how much of the success has the non-aligned movement achieved along those objectives? Besides, how much non-aligned are the members of the non-aligned movement?
And are they not aligned?
Is it at the end of the day?
Exactly.
So it's such a huge debate that I think now that our senior brother is here, we shall try to give him more time, really, to share with our audience that even in the non-aligned movement, we have got a lot of alignment. Because you see, the members are there. We can now start critiquing. And for your information, we have got non-aligned movement as actually the second biggest global body after the United Nations.
Yeah, you can
Formed
say
in
it is-
1961.
Yes, the membership itself, we have well over 120
It's 120
members.
members.
So when you look at it, and in line with their objectives, all the big members there, India, be it Egypt, be it Ghana, be it, how, for instance, now, is India not aligned to anything? They are non-aligned now. When we are talking about India in BRICS, we are talking about India in the G20, we are talking about India in, you see, so at the end of the day, we are saying that some of these bodies, and of course we cannot say that we critique them and we become so blunt to say that they have not achieved anything. No. I think that would be extremely unfair. Like our senior brother Piero Lumumba said, yes, we have got issues with the African Union. We know for a fact that we could have done better. Some have come up to say, and I keep telling you this, that the African Union, for instance, is a toothless dog. Others who are more annoyed than that go ahead to say that it is no dog at all. But for heaven's sake, we well know that upon the establishment of the African Union, now the former Organization of African Union, now the African Union, the major mission was the physical liberation of the continent, honestly speaking.
Yeah, but
the physical liberation has taken place. In the same light, if we say that the non-aligned movement, one of the objectives was to make sure that they hold at bay the forces of imperialism, we can say, yes, we are not totally there, but in all fairness, I think there's some measure of success in holding at bay the forces of imperialism. Although imperialism is vicious, it is not easy to see with the naked eyes, especially to those who do not take trouble in sharpening their brain and their eyes to diagnose that actually what we are seeing here is imperialism.
Yes, but in Rugarama, when you look at the non-aligned countries, the non-aligned movement, the 120 so countries, it's a very big population. And the problem is how much of this influence that...
This is actually 60% of the UN.
Exactly. And how much influence do we exert? How much of the power do we hold when it comes to this voting at the UN and even the other subsequent positions that we can yield? Given like now, given what is happening, can we, when you look at these countries on the map, you see the biggest part of the world is under the non-aligned movement. But where are we?
I want to respond to this non-aligned movement story and just maybe take the cat out of the bag. That there are world bodies, the United Nations. Then the question is, who sponsors the United Nations? Because the United Nations is one thing.
Yeah, I heard last time America said they were pulling out and people were shaking.
So the whole the World Health Organizations are coming out of United Nations. They have arms. They even have peacekeepers, but who carry guns. These are called peacekeepers, but they carry guns.
Yes, yeah.
And they run around. See the advantage of having organizations. Then you equip them with a health section. You equip them with a banking section, which is the IMF. And the World Bank, that speaks to the United Nations. Then you equip them with a military wing, that you call security and peace forces.
Yes.
But we know some of them, those peace cars were found in Congo here with accidents and the minerals in bags.
Are pouring out.
But remember, at the front, what you see is United Nations.
Yes.
And sounds like people are just there
mission.
with nice little flags.
We
Yes.
must
Okay.
interrogate who this United Nations
But when you
is.
go behind the United Nations to find out exactly how are they operating, you will find their hands in many cookies. Now I want to come to non-aligned movement. The weakness of African organization and the weakness of non-aligned movement. We have not seen non-aligned movement doing health systems during COVID. We did not hear a statement from Non-Aligned Movement
Absolutely.
saying we are doing something about COVID. We have not seen a security force from Non-Aligned Movement. That when one of the Non-Aligned Movement members is challenged, then the Non-Aligned must align with their member.
Then probably information, Comrade Maponga, that even one of the strongest members and the founding member of the Non-Aligned Movement, India, which was producing COVID vaccines, didn't even come to the rescue of her own members
Who are also non-aligned.
who are also non-aligned.
I want to challenge and say that for Africa in particular, our problem has been the plurality of organizations and the fragmenting of organizations constantly. One organization fails to deliver, let's start another one.
Another one.
One organization fails to deliver, let's start another one. The issue we're discussing is just peace and unity in Africa. But out of that, you have the OAU itself. No, let's change. It's now AU. No, let's change. Let's have SADC. No, let's have COMESA. Let's have ECOWAS. The real thing people are running away from at the center here is let's just make Africa one country.
Yes.
So there's no ending to us. Even now, I mean, if I can ask you, my elder, how many Pan-African groups on WhatsApp are you part of? How many? On Telegram?
Quite a number.
Every morning, another Pan-African group
Comes
is
up.
registering. Because at the end of the day, all of them don't want to come together and say, what is it that we must do? I've never heard of a Pan-African conference where all Pan-Africanists can meet together and have one agenda. So Non-Aligned Movement has no agenda for peace.
I agree.
OAU has no agenda for peace. They have no agenda for global warming. Because at the very core of their function, they are caught breaking the very same rules and mandates that they say they are delivering.
Exactly. And also this promise of the funding, who is funding, whether the people because we have had issues in them, still having issues in the western part of Africa with the coups that are going on. And then you ask, who is funding the coup, but who is also funding the government? You may find it's the same person who has been funding the government, but realizing now that the usefulness of this regime is no more, he will go and fund another one to look like the new people, but the same tricks.
After America normally funds both the opposition and the government.
Yeah, but for whoever has interest, does that. The problem, except maybe
and then they say we are facilitating
for
peace.
Gabon,
you are arming a rebel group to fight.
For Gabon, it has been maybe a home ground, like we discussed last time. But we have seen this in Niger, for example. People saying now, with the French going out, we have to bring in the Russians. You jumping from one court into another, but maybe, like I said, we are serving a structure which was implanted. And unless that structure has been dismantled, Africa will still continue having problems, because you have at the front you have something, but behind it you have something else. Last time on Ndukumapoka we were discussing, I said, who told the World Bank to decide who you should sleep with before they give you money? It is a loan, for heaven's sake.
That's alignment. They must align you first with their principles, and then you can have access. I mean, why is Uganda now is stuck with no loans and etc. coming to the country?
Exactly.
Because you are not aligned to their. So this whole issue of a non-alignment, I think I like your suggestion. There is nothing called non-alignment.
Yeah, someone is aligned.
You are either aligned to France, to China, to Russia, to Britain, or to America. So maybe if they were aligned, we would not have a problem with aligning ourselves also.
But even then, Comrade Mututa, probably for the benefit of our audience also, we will take into consideration the fact that even this World Bank we are talking about, for whom was World Bank established?
Sure.
You see, if we say World Bank,
who owns the
World Bank by
actually
1944 came into existence, by 1946 after the Second World War, America emerging as the superpower, and with a few cousins, they started operations, and it was to reconstruct Europe. Europe was reconstructed. To reconstruct and atone for the sins they committed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They did that, and Japan is also a global economic power. Now, where does Africa come in? So is it therefore any surprise that now the so-called World Bank, to me, which is actually Washington Bank, and gives such abnormal conditionalities that, morally speaking, Uganda, you have passed, you can imagine, very ridiculous. The anti-homosexuality law, which is actually infringing on the fundamental human right, and therefore we are considering not giving you more funding. And then we are putting our hands on top of our heads and crying that we are now finished. Then what is worse is that you get these politicians locally here who are going to castigate the government for passing such a law, you see? And then they are going to say, we are finished and this leadership should go away. Maponga said the other time, those of you who were not there at the Global Awards at Fairway, I haven't listened to his speech at Victoria University. Probably we need to access it. Some of these things we need information. That you see, the moment you do not identify clearly who your enemy is, you will keep running in a circle, a vicious circle of confusion. Africa, interestingly, due to the nature of our education system, we have not properly understood who our enemy is, and it will take us such a long time to know how to deal with the real issues that affect us. I want to conclude by saying that, therefore, when you look at these global groupings, the G7, the G20, which are basically the clubs of those who have made it in life, and when they meet, the purpose of their meeting, the G7, the G20, is to ensure how to keep their hold on their victims. G20 we have met. What is the purpose? They will not put it on the agenda, but at the back of their mind, it is that how do we keep siphoning resources away from these less privileged, non-aware countries like Africa? How does, for instance, France maintain her crunch on the French West Africa? How do we continuously galvanize the pact for continuation of colonization? And if America sees that, for instance, France has benefited much more, then they are also going to, like they are doing, you have witnessed what they are doing in West Africa. They are bypassing their own cousins to establish direct links with the former so-called French colonies, so that they can also take part and share in the root.
Yeah, one person is Yasin is from Fort Portal, I think, saying yes, but anyway, why are we even using that language here?
No, I think that is simplistic. I have also said that we don't like that kind of argument. You say Cuba, for instance, and is not Spanish, but the Cubans who speak Spanish, and they know they are not Spanish, have gone a long way in establishing very serious high indicators of development, even under serious economic embargo. The literacy rates are high, their health systems are good.
Perfect.
Does it stop them? But even then, I'm not saying that we shouldn't develop our own language. No, we should have our own language. But now that we don't have it, for instance, we don't have Swahili on the African continent, must we say, therefore, we are not going to address these challenges simply because we don't have a unifying language?
And the other thing we're saying, but what do? We have our brothers and sisters languishing in jails, including in Saudi Arabia, where girls are shipped for manual labor.
Exactly, and again we go to what Joshua Maponga has always preached. You see, when you have not realized your self-worth, you as a people, you will always be taken advantage of.
I wanted to step back a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to step back a little bit. The issue of human rights. I've applied my mind to a couple of issues there that would be very interesting to pass. You see, Uganda passes I'm trying to use logical thinking. Uganda passes a law that based on the majority rule, which is democratic. If people had voted no, then it's no. If people vote yes, then it's yes. Then people must be allowed to sovereignty to rule themselves and govern themselves the way they want to govern themselves. But when you come to this issue of human rights, and then you stop putting aid and help for food and health because someone has broken a human right for sex and emotions. Now you want to come back on the chart and say, which one is a human right? Do people have rights to food? Do people have rights to medicines? So when you put sanctions and you stop supporting, are you not breaking human rights by trying to uphold another human right? Because then human rights for me has become a place of conflict.
Exactly. But also at the same time, you remember, these people are saying we need to preach the gospel of tolerance. In other words, if you don't agree with me, you are not my enemy, and I should also respect your position. And so if Africans are saying, no, this is not us, this is not what we want, this is not what we do, and then for you are saying, no, you should do it because it's a human right. Now, what is the human right here we're talking about?
The human rights are only for those that have money.
Exactly.
For poor people, have no choices.
And we have seen many of the Africans also jump on this wagon, and then we need to have the values, because African societies are value-based. And within the values, the rights are therein implanted. And it may not be written in most of our cultures, but it is known from day one when a person starts to speak and to walk and to talk. So I think, like Ndugu was saying, that sometimes the African lack to know who our enemies are has also brought us all these problems, that people can exploit us with ease without knowing who is our enemy. And they will now force us to believe that we are enemies of ourselves. Ignorance, that we are ignorant, we have diseases, we don't understand. No, all these things are heaped on us, and then we also believe that that is who we are. We begin to bleach for at least to look like them, and then we can talk their language like the man was saying, but that's what we can use for now. So, gentlemen, I believe that all these things are doable, and these things are reversible, but the problem is within the African population itself. So what, before we go for the break, what do we need to do to begin with, to see our future, to see our enemies, and identify our friends?
Firstly, it's an educational program. I'm here in the issue of language. You spend 24, 17, 18 years in school not studying your language, and then you want to ask us today, after 54 years, why are we not having a language, which you don't even know? The person who is writing that maybe does not even know his clan name, but he's talking about it. He's talking about language. But then that's a conversation for another day. It starts off with education. What kind of information are we sending to the people out there? The poor people are attracted to money, and the weak-minded are attracted to money. Then the next level are those that are attracted to power. But the third level are those that are attracted to those that control, those that have power, and those that have money. Now, if we must understand as a continent, those that have money are these ones who are abusing us right now.
Sure.
And we're trying to find out who do we join. Those that have power are those that are controlling these who are behind them.
What?
But if we can look for those that have wisdom, we may fully understand the complexity of the monster that we are dealing with. What must we do? Educate, don't agonize, organize.
And someone saying, as we go for the break, saying we shouldn't blame the Western world, because even Asians were also colonized. When we come back, we'll start from there. Going away for a break shortly. We'll be back with more discussion on this, getting interesting inside here. And please don't go away. Stay on with us on set. We'll be back shortly after the break.
From Airtel. Buy or gift. Buy or gift.
Get freaky too. Dial star 100 star 0 hash to load a Freaky Friday bundle for you to enjoy the best offers on voice and data.
To buy a bundle for friends and family, dial star 100 star 4 hash. Freaky Friday with Airtel. Buy or gift a bundle today. Dial star 100 star 0 hash to get started.
Airtel, a reason to imagine.
Pick of the day on UBC.
One-on-one with Michael Jordan Lukomwa.
A weekly face-to-face conversation focusing on accountability, inspiration, information, and sensitization of the public from the various sources, such as inspirational profiles.
Having a disability is not inability.
Every Friday 9 p.m., it's one-on-one with Michael Jordan Lukomwa.
Don't you see anywhere that you would give a credit in the fight against COVID?
My role as the owner of the country is not to, be preoccupied by giving credit to my servant.
We have said that if we are to talk to General Museveni, there must be certain conditions in place.
Is it true that you paid 5 million shillings to MPs that voted for?
Was brought to you by
MTN Momo Pay is the easy way to pay. Dial star 165 star 3 hash or use the MTN Momo app. You don't need cash. MTN Momo Pay is safe and free.
I got it.
What do you mean you got it? Have you won a lottery?
Yes, this is kind of like a lottery to me.
Let me see. But these are URA receipts now.
Yes, exactly my point. See, I had tax areas that had accumulated for a while now, and I was burdened by the penalties and the interest. But guess what? All I had to do was to pay my principal tax, and now I'm free.
What?
Yes.
How? I mean, it's impossible.
It is possible. The government has done it. Yes, the government has given a chance to all taxpayers to pay their outstanding principal tax that accrued until 30th of June with no interest or penalties.
But now they're really
Imagine, yes! So yeah, all you have to do is simply pay your principal tax and enjoy the waiver on penalties and interest. And this goes up to the end of December 2023.
How do I do that to also enjoy the waiver?
All you have to do is simply pay your principal tax to benefit from waiver on interests and penalties that runs till end of December 2023. Pay your outstanding principal tax using the available payment channels or simply dial star 285 hash or visit the nearest URA office for guidance before 31st December 2023. Remember, this chance comes only once.
Uganda Revenue Authority. Developing Uganda together.
The stage is a world of entertainment. Get the latest entertainment, lifestyle, events and activities. Chats with celebrities that make headlines.
It's your girl Zari, Mama Tifa. I'm in town, I'm in Uganda.
It's showbiz. Join me, Mary. I intend to connect you to a lot of fun. Cause I know you want it, you love it, you enjoy it. All on Powerful Level Magazine, reloaded for you right here on UBC. Don't miss out every Saturday, 12 p.m.
Juko. Yo. What you go? Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the Parish Development Model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. Okay. The Parish Development Model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Conversationally.
Yeah, from the break, and before we left for the break, someone was also already asking, say, why is it, even Asia was also colonized, but they have kept themselves off from blaming the West and they're pushing on. Can Africa also do the same? Stop blaming everyone for our mistakes and failures, and we take the bull by the horns. Can we move? Rachel, you're welcome.
Unfortunately, we missed that first step at the close of the physical colonial era. It was a great opportunity to redefine ourselves. It was an opportunity to start over. It was an opportunity to reconnect to our glorious past. It was an opportunity to set down a foundation that would take us forward for years and years to come. The people who started that movement those many years ago were very clear-headed. They were passionate about the reinvention of the African peoples and their superstate. They were people who understood very clearly that there is no foreigner who can have the interests of the people that they seek to subjugate. They were very clear that we had very many good aspects of our civilization that could very well anchor our future. They understood that it was a process for the ages. It is not a one-off where you say, now I am independent and everything will be working out, whether or not I put forward the effort, whether or not I work to get everyone else on board. What I'm really trying to say is that since we missed that first step, we might as well start where we should have been working from all along. Ndugu Mabonga here talked about the fact that education is key at the very center of what should be. We know very well that most of the African nations are very much still hand and glove into the colonial educational way of doing things. If we are to start off as we should, Ndugu Mututa, it is to re-examine what we are teaching our people. That is the starting place.
But I think even with, you're talking about the moment when finally we got independent, that we were allowed to do things as independent states. Of course, that independence is also a subject of discussion. But you look, I think we have carried on this ghost that has come with us. Nkrumah was visiting China when he was overthrown by his own people. When you look at Nani is bribed by the Americans and other agencies to get rid of Lumumba, then he can become a president and also become an ally of the West. And then when you look at all these founding Africans who had the zeal and the will of uniting Africa are being taken rid of by their own people, who are being bribed by others to have their hand now we're crying about. Has this spirit died?
The spirit has not died. What has died is the connectivity to the spirit. In other words, you may have your handset, but if the network is not connected to your handset, I can't call you, even if you're sitting across from me. So the spirit you're talking about of the African as he was in days past, and that is not to say that we don't or we should not adopt good practices. There are things from every civilization that are good and wholesome. There are things from every civilization that are ugly and detestable. We're saying that there are many good things about the colonizers, but not everything. What they have not accepted at the same time is that other civilizations have made great contributions to them.
And
they keep trying. For example, we can talk about the place of cocoa. Cocoa is native to South America. And of course, chocolate is now front and center of the Western diet, if you will. But the fact that the people of South America had some uses for cocoa, which are not these cosmetic uses, some of them medicinal. No one gives credit to them for having had a realization that cocoa is a good thing. They take the experiences of other people and pretend that everything good, everything proper, and everything wonderful is Western.
Yeah, and I think Nduku Maponga mentioned something about that, saying that until that we need to know our enemies, but also identify our opportunities and our strengths. Because there's some things that Africans have done, for example, they cannot be done by. And one of the reasons as to why we were talking about when President Zuma kept quiet when Gaddafi was being attacked, because for him had been promised a job at least at somewhere at the UN. But also, you realize that France was embarrassed because Gaddafi had given them money. And I think someone was fearing to pay.
Brother, I think we've become too nice sometimes. Let's just agree that the white community, the white colonial mindset, has never respected black people. You are
or Asians or anybody else.
Yes, they have no conscience. Ubuntu means you have Ubuntu. And since whites are not part of Bantu, then maybe let me say they have no Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is the humanness of humanity. I want to backtrack on your Asia success story, because they were also on colonialism. They succeeded because in their recovery, they did not use colonial systems to get out of that system. So you have Uganda is now independent, Zimbabwe is now independent, Zambia is independent. But the bank that they're transiting in is Standard Bank. It is Barclays Bank. The oil that they're pouring, it is BP, it is Shell, it is Caltex, it is Total. So at the end of the day, there you are independent, but all the financial means and transactions that are happening in your own independence, you have no control over those transactions. So how much independent are you and how much control do you have? So we have people in power, but those people that are in power are not in charge, are not in control. So you are simply in power as of sitting in a chair. But as to who controls the price of bread, who controls the price of fuel, who controls immigration, who controls donor money, who controls function, who controls your health, who controls your what? You just have motorcades of people running through town telling us they're in control. But at the end of the day, they're just people in power. But those that are in control are sitting in the back of it. So Asia managed to capture its banks.
Exactly.
Asia sank into their own culture. China is next to it. Let me compare for you China, Asia, Singapore, and Dubai, and Russia maybe, and Germany, in a quick one. In Germany, create the government as a state machine that produces machinery, and that is done through a dictator called Hitler. Germany is built on the strength of Hitler's dictatorship. Russia, exclude everybody else out, do your own adventures, fight your own wars, create your own nuclears, get to the space. Technology becomes an issue. China, close the borders to all other outside influences in North Korea. Take technology from other countries, re-engineer them, reverse engineering, create philosophical state, ban Facebook, ban Twitter, ban all foreign media spaces, lock your people into a machinery of labor, and they can deliver. UAE, have your royalty in place. You don't need political figures. These countries that I've mentioned, and they're successful, when were their last elections?
You can't even have them.
Russia was 5 years ago?
5 years ago?
Something like that.
And did we change anything?
Did we change? Like I was So the problem is, I think Africa, and one person is writing here, doing which countries, they say the civilization we are in, which is impossible, education and social life behaviors are all totally Western.
I think even Ndugumututa, before you move on to the next thing, when we examine where we are, it's actually a tragic case. We are talking about, we mentioned, I think in passing, the G27 formation or the NonAligned Movement. But do you know that these formations the G77. Do you know that it operates out of the United Nations headquarters? The liaison officers, only one is in Africa. There's one in Nairobi. There's one in Vienna, which is Europe, of course. There's one in Austria. There's one in Washington. Now, and of course, their main base is in New York. You are talking about operating in a system that is controlled by someone else. Remember, these are people who set out back in '64, claiming they want to restart their own economic journey, their own political destiny, and so on. When you're in someone else's house, how on earth? These many years later, almost 60, they are still in that very same, they are stuck. That is no way forward. So no wonder that there is nothing new coming out of them. You're talking about people who cannot champion their own causes. You're talking about India being one of the major partners in this arrangement. You cannot voice your concerns on the powerful platform that you have, because many of these Western outfits now have licensing arrangements with Indian firms. How come that India cannot speak with authority? Because I'm the one producing your stuff. But that is really how badly we're doing. The fact that it has moved away from the physical colonization. Now it is mental. Now it is psychological.
More spiritual.
Even when you manufacture the man's vaccines, you cannot tell him, look, tomorrow, unless you deliver 6 to my house, I will not make them. It is very sad.
Yeah, because like he put it, I think it is also now very, very important for the African leadership to agree that we have a problem. And that problem can only be solved when Africa comes together and sits down as one. Now, that's again where we have the biggest problems, because some people have allegiances to this group, others have allegiances. We have now the other country where you have one country, but you have the francophone and English phone, and they can't sit to talk. And the president is always in Paris to have parties. So you realize that, like we were discussing, part of the problem is that the leadership of Africa is still too fragmented. We are talking about issues that are affecting Africa, but the UN, the African Union cannot even sit down and say, hey, let's do this, or cannot even stop. Last time we talked here and we said, why can't we even, however cosmetic it is, why can't we also cause sanctions to some of these people? Say, you will not step in Africa because we don't need you. We can even tell these people who are promising us money, no money, to say, you keep your money, but Africa will have to have its money. With all these resources, we have all these minerals, and we cannot even have a bank which is functional. Still, the bank has to be funded by the Europeans and Americans. So I think, like one person put here on the messages, that we should stop blaming these people. We also have a problem. Don't we have a problem? And we go.
I think my elder has not spoken for a long time.
Okay.
Thank you. I wanted to give more time to you being our guest and our senior elder. So I did it tactically. I'm always here every Friday, so I wanted to allow you more time.
What your question was?
This issue of continuous blaming the West, even the leaders ourselves, our leaders themselves would also look like they're blaming the West. But when you look at the way they have been, some of them actually have had direct payment to be able to get to power.
I've done some pastoral work when I was young as a church pastor, and while we were preaching and doing the church work, the mothers and fathers would always gather together, and the children, we want good husbands for our sons. And then the other one says, no, we want good wives for our sons. And they would start talking, and I was there listening. And in my conclusion, I said, so these good husbands and good wives you're looking for, which home produces them? In other words, if you are not looking after and producing a good girl, you cannot expect me to be producing a good boy, and then my good boy will marry a good girl. These boys that are going to be messing up and giving us trouble are actually our children.
Our children, yes.
Now listen to me carefully. So these politicians, all of them, they're like just you and me, brought up by the same system, desiring same things, memorized the same poems. When they get to office, they also want the same car, like you. Why are we doing these things that we're doing right now? We're trying to rewire. We're trying to reformat the political disc of our young people so that when they get into positions of political conversation, we can begin to have a different language in our parliaments. Right now what we have is a unified voice of fellow comrades who must always agree. Yes, I agree. And it's not again arguing for the sake of arguing. It's knowing we need to change this policy on health. We need to change this policy on technology. We need to change this policy on education. We need to change this policy on traditional governance systems and begin to reconcile. Otherwise, I'm sorry to say this, otherwise all our governments are crime scenes. Sure. Because we have presidents and leaders who are governing land and eating taxes from the soil, which does not belong to them. The land belongs to the cultural and traditional people. We went to war so that we could restore power where it belonged. We came into power and now we are now running the same estate. In other words, we just changed the person sitting on the chair. But the function of the system remains unperturbed. Africans, listen to me and listen to me well. Stop wasting time with the tail of the snake. And you think that when you beat the tail, the snake will die. The head of the snake is what I want to call the constitutionalism and the democratic system that undermines people and gives foreign people more advantage over the economy, and you as a local person must remain as a slave. Our system is manufacturing slaves. Kill the head of the snake, because inside this head, that's where all the thinking and the policies that are restricting your growth are, including which country, what are the demarcations, who needs a passport. It's in that constitution. Who must be president, and who is a chief, and who are you? What is your ID number? It's all inside there. Who must you marry? And when you divorce, what must happen? It's even in there. Your father's land can't be invested. This one can be taken away. This belongs to the state. This doesn't belong to you. Where is it written? It's written over there. So you have this piece of paper that governs even our presidents. That's why I said the other day that even if you can put a cat or a dog on top of American government, that government would run and nothing would stop. Why? Sure. Because the system.
Exactly, we've had idiots in form of
I didn't think Trump was going to be a president, but now in his madness, it looks like he's much more sober than Biden.
That is someone. Ndugu Irumba, you're saying something.
Actually, he has said it much better. I couldn't say it much, better than him. The problem of Africa is that there is a template, a system upon which we run our government. But that template is not our making. It's not ours. And the person who gave it to us intentionally knew how it would still continue serving his interests. So unless you go and disrupt, I like my elder senior bishop, he says, you must disrupt the system. When you disrupt the system, they will come to understand that there is a problem. Right now, they don't even know that there is a problem. Because however much you're crying, America has not stopped from milking Africa. France has not stopped from milking Africa. The entire Europe has not stopped, but you're crying. So unless you gather the energy to disrupt the system, so that you put an end to that tap that is, taking our resources into their tanks.
Someone is asking.
You cannot, they will not even understand that you are crying. Sometimes a frog can be crying down because an elephant has stepped on it. But you looking there, you may actually not realize that there is even a frog under the feet of an elephant because it is too huge. The foot is too huge for you to realize that there is a frog under it. But the frog is actually looking at you as a savior, but you are not even understanding that the frog needs my assistance.
Someone out there is asking, talk about the same, say, is Africa can Africa be part of the world order, the new order?
Of course it can, but not in the present form.
Where is it headquartered? Where is the new order?
Well, it's in someone's software. You've been telling us. But
in other words,
not in the present. Okay, can it be part of the new world order? Of course it can. but we're asking in a meaningful way. We have been in ceremonial roles all this while, including our latest, posturing, which says we are now part and parcel of the G20 arrangement. That is posturing. I mean, really and truly, you heard one of the clips that has been doing the rounds from Ndugu Ramaphosa. He was basically crying. He was talking about, he was lamenting, and then they could zoom in into a close-up of Macron. And Macron was getting red-faced. Was shifting uneasily and so on. But it was a case of they feel like they're beggars. And I thought, of course you are. And he was talking about the recent COVID-19 situation where all the vaccines were ring-fenced. Ndugu Mabonga here talked about when you're poor, you don't have choices. And he talked about, this is Ramaphosa, he talked about the dilemma of Africa was brought to the fore most recently by the COVID-19 situation, where all the vaccines were ring-fenced by the so-called rich, and then they decided just how few you could get, and they decided just what regimen you could be under, and exactly what rules govern this disease. We did not create these rules of talking about shut off your economy for so long. Someone did, WHO, and they said if you don't cut it off, we are not coming anymore. And this sort of situation. And he was talking about it got worse. When South Africa in particular said, all right, we have the infrastructure. Let's do our thing. Let's create our vaccine, depending on our situation and so on. And they were resisted firmly and steadfastly. And he said, what kind of partners are you? When we say we want to get ourselves out of this mess, you erect every kind of barrier under heaven.
Make it impossible.
When we say, okay, we'll wait to receive, you give us the tail end, the absolute least, if not the expired bit. What kind of partners are you? You are asking, can we be part? Yes, but not meaningfully until we reinvent this software.
And I don't know why we seem to fear so much that if we don't do this, because again, from that experience, you realize that Cuba, for example, was very first to make its own vaccine when it came to COVID. And
did it have to ask WHO?
No. And the Americans...
Maybe the solution is right there. Just hold it. You've just hit it very well. Cuba made a vaccine, and I think she picked it up quickly. Did they have to get it approved? But if they tried...
Uganda has tried some things. We are not moving.
So what you do, this autonomy story we're talking about, when it's your country and you're sovereign, it simply means that you have power to decide, to invent, to implement, and to govern yourself as a country. So we don't need approval. And I think these WHO rules, these ISO 800s, these FAO regulations, all these external bodies that are sitting outside, IMF. And you must meet those requirements. We're going to give them
and they dispatch a team to inspect your facilities.
And all of these guys, is rightfully put it, where's the address? They're not here. So at the end of the day, we are discussing again at the center of African freedom and power, this idea of sovereignty. When we signed the declaration that we are now an independent country, let's be honest, are you independent of the world body, or you are independent as a cosmetic issue?
Yeah, because then that one, for example, again, the Americans, even without having confirmation of this vaccine from Cuba by WHO or whatever, they were quietly smuggling these drugs back to themselves, knowing that their systems had failed. So I think what we need as Africans is not necessarily to wait until everyone is saying yes, because no one is going to do that.
Can I cry out once? Can I cry out once? Like violently?
Yes.
I think let's stop over talking things. Sure. We need to convert all our universities into innovation hubs. We need all our technical colleges into machinery design, and we need to industrialize, basically. Let's stop commercializing education. Let's make it fundamental to creating new products. If you're an engineer, in my own eyes, and you are 40, 50, 60 years old, and you have not discovered anything, maybe you must quit.
You know what the problem is? Funding.
Are you sure?
That's what the university will tell you.
Don't you think it's ingenuity?
When you
How
look
much
at
money
our
do we
research,
waste?
any given university, be it in Ghana, be it in South Africa, be it in Egypt, wherever, Uganda inclusive, the biggest bulk of our research is foreign funded.
But why make research foreign?
That's my
that's
my
a
worry.
simple question.
But that aside, in this very country in which we are, Uganda, it's on record, the Inspector General of Government, where wastage, bleeding of resources through corruption is up to half the national budget. So, are you sure there is no money?
Money is there.
Or it is just the misuse of what we have? I think that is really where the
So
problem
I think, like he's saying, because our technology has been demonized from day one. When they told you, even today, I think 2 or 3 years back, in Makerere here, the person who was manufacturing tear gas, and that guy was arrested. Finally, of course, things were sorted out. Because
police is buying tear gas from somewhere.
Exactly.
You are manufacturing tear gas, you're claiming they arrested.
You see, so the spirit of innovation in Africa has been so affected. If I get MK 2047 and modify it, someone is going to arrest me. Why?
The political liberation struggle had guns in it.
Sure, yes.
And grenades.
Yes.
But the vicious spirit of economic reformers is a bit docile. You see, the two wars are equally the same, but the other one is more damaging than the other. The economic is more damaging. This one is just exterminating life. What we lack are what I might call military economic commandos, who literally approach the economy with the military precision, like we did when we were fighting political freedom. But we are here tiptoeing around banks, tiptoeing around insurance companies, tiptoeing around pharmaceuticals, tiptoeing around universities and academic curriculums, all these babies that are soft, who are actually the cause of the problem at the center. We're here trying to talk how do we solve the issue. But here are the partners. And until you become violent, in Africa, creating our own parallel systems.
Exactly, talking about parallel systems. I'm going to again use your example. First of all, the issue of collapsing boundaries, that Africa can be a flat, one country. But look at the systems that are supposed to fit in that. Give me your flight plan, how you traveled, for example.
I did Joburg, Harare, Kenya, Uganda.
At least that one is
There is no direct flight from Harare to Kampala, is it?
And many other capitals.
No. That's why you had first to go to Nairobi. So.
Exactly.
Or again with Johannesburg, yes, there's one to Johannesburg, but Harare and
yeah, so if Africans are not talking, are not moving, are not meeting, then that's where the problem is. And it has been made in such a way that there was a time, at least things are now improving, when you are to present, I mean, for example, in Uganda said, when you are making a call, I have to call someone in the US, then it connects me to someone, say then, who am I talking to?
Everybody.
But I think along those very same lines, to reiterate what Ndugu Mabonga has been talking about, while we are docile in approach to our economic emancipation, our colonizers are far from docile. They are violent in the extreme. So you cannot match violence with being docile and
with
hope
religion.
to be making. I'll give you.
Become Christian. Let's pray, and the man is holding a gun.
Well, I'll give you a very pertinent example because this has happened in recent weeks. We know that when the government changed hands in Niger, and France is on record saying they would not allow their interests to be endangered. So much so that they have refused to vacate that country. There are 1,500 armed Frenchmen who are in a base in that country, and they said they're going nowhere. Not only that, Niger asked their good ambassador of France to please take his leave. He said he's also going nowhere. We are talking about people who are violent about retaining their pillaging ways. Not only that, and I'm thinking someone advised Macron, he caught himself just in the nick of time, because France apparently had a chance or an intention of actually intervening militarily in that country. It's on record that the government of France asked Morocco to give them permission to overfly their territory. On their way to unseat the leadership in Niger, Morocco said, no, we're not interested. They went to Algeria and said, please, we need to overfly your territory to engage these little guys who have taken over power. And the people of Algeria said, no, we will not be part. What we are saying is that for them to safeguard economic interests, they'll bomb, they'll cut you up, they'll do whatever it takes.
France, for example, is very notorious on that. You remember when they put cement in the water systems before they left? And last time you saw the clip, of course it has been disputed, when they were destroying cars.
No, they're very violent. In economic interests, they're very violent.
Can we make a statement?
Yes.
Can we make a statement that in all African countries, we close French embassies?
We close French
embassies.
What about American embassies?
Yeah, they can go also.
And German?
The British can go. You know what we are looking at?
Yeah, because what
are they open in Zimbabwe?
His point.
We have one of the biggest, the Americans.
What are they doing there?
They want to supervise the person they've divorced. I don't love you, but I'm not leaving your house. I want to see who you're going to bed with, what time you're eating, what time. And again, as a psychologist,
exactly.
for relationships, a person with such an attitude, we call them narcissistic. They're almost like sadistic. I mean,
so what are they doing there, really?
I don't love you. But I
won't let you go.
I won't let you go. And no one must touch you. No, and I'm going to make sure that I control. And when I'm bored, I'll go and switch off electricity and water. To make sure that. And how do you deal with a partner like that? That's a psychiatric word. Americans and British and French, they need a psychiatric word. I mean, politically, they are beyond normal. Because if you don't want something, just pack your bags.
Now that's
see you later.
Yeah, they don't love you, but they don't want another person to love you.
You.
No, you are unlovable. You are unlovable.
Not China, not Russia.
No.
Back at your point, assuming cosmetically and hypothetically, if we said, let's close these embassies, who takes that decision? That's the problem of Africa. Because I would have been very comfortable looking at this African Union sometime sitting down to say, no, we are not going to allow this to happen on the African continent. It should have been African Union to say, we are not going to allow France or another country to fly in to go and sort out issues in West Africa.
But we already said one of the problems is that your budget is not underwritten by you. So then the next day, they'll cut off your financing.
The headquarters of African Union were built by China.
China is not part of this latest scheming.
Yeah, but I mean, that's why it all began
exactly.
from. Where you're sitting.
And while that's of course, that again, it was discovered that the building was bugged.
Yes,
and
they had bugs all over.
12 midnight, it was transmitting all the conversation from the toilet to the conference rooms, to the offices, the emails and telephone calls into China.
Into China. So
for their own reasons.
Yeah, but if
they want to know what we're talking about. So
when they were building, they were bugging it.
But we've said that many times, that there is no one beyond the shores of Africa who has our interest in, not the Turkish, not the Indians, not the Portuguese. Everyone wants to pillage and to steal.
Yes. So whoever comes here comes knowing there's something that they are going to benefit. And you have seen now China becoming another colonial.
The latest colonizer.
Exactly, in its own way. It may not be doing whatever the other people are doing, but maybe what it's doing is worse. When you look at issues of the environment, when you look at issues of
what about the high interest loans?
So you realize that we Africans, unless, like one said, a beautiful woman with no brains suffers, we still suffer.
Hardware suffers.
Exactly. So what we need to look at.
What is painful is that where they are plundering your rich country, your continent, they are rating you as third world, the poorest continent. So what are you stealing from
a poor person?
From
a poor person. Yes, yes. And these are some of the things that people, viewers and people in the studio, we are looking at. That Africa is not, first of all, poor, because we have seen, for example, cars that are manufactured in Japan are buying at $2,000, but they're selling them here at $5,000 in Africa, and they are going. So the problem of poverty is not the problem. We have had people who are telling us that poor people are those ones who cannot afford $2 per day, so that those are the poor bracket. But they're not looking at what the Africans have back at home. A street person, a poor person in New York is not the same person, poor person in Malawi or poor person in Kampala or poor person in Nairobi. Because the poor person you are talking about in the village is the person who has land, but does he need your $2 anyway on his land back in the village? He doesn't. So I think it's also important that the African leadership wakes up.
I have one African leadership I hate with all my heart. He's the one who takes money from his people, then moves that money out of circulation of his people.
And the banks it in Europe.
Banks it somewhere else, so that his own people cannot access that money.
It might be in a neighboring country, but in Europe is where he keeps it.
Mauritius, Dubai, and etc. So the quality of our leadership again, the quality of our leadership. I'm not here again to make anyone feel good. I'll say what I want to say. I don't agree with Kagame 100%. I have my own issues. But when a leader at least sits down to begin to put a plan of restoring dignity on his people, give the guy some bells. I don't agree with Hitler, but there's a success. I don't agree with Mugabe all the way. But
Robert Gabriel Mugabe.
But I agree with him when it comes to give the land back to the people. So again, what we begin to see...
Do you agree with Museveni?
I agree with Museveni. I stood, the day we passed on the LGBT thing, I stood up. And I must say, every leader, you mature with time. The Museveni that was here some 30 years ago is not the Museveni that you have now. In fact, I wish the Museveni we have now had been awake 30 years ago. Maybe some of these things he's beginning to speak about, Gaddafi, when he felt maybe he did not have a voice big enough then. But if you look at what you have now is Museveni, he's much more mature, much sharper. I think he has almost understood who the enemy is and his language. Now, and at the peak of his wisdom, he's losing physical power over galvanized, which is always the plight of life.
For him, he has identified the enemy.
But now the strength to fight physically is low. So we needed some young people to plug into Museveni's brain right now and pull out as much software as you can. Because if you don't learn what he has learned, when you get into power, you will make the same mistakes that he made.
No worse.
Which he is trying to correct now at his old age. So it's a fact of life. Young people, these opposition boys like Bob Benny Wines and etc. Stop running around town calling functions and people to slogan around you. Go sit down with the old man. Find out the path that he has walked. See all the booby traps of the West. So that by the time you get into power, if ever you will get there, you will have some knowledge, history. Do not learn from the bush and argue how many teeth a horse has when the horse is in front of you. Just open the damn mouth and count the teeth.
Now, when you know, we have seen this happen, and we saw this Ndugu when Mugabe also at some point at his peak of his administration, I think also faced the same fate. Much as the issue of the land, giving out the back to the people the land, and also the mercenaries that confronted him. But you realize that these voices need to have a system where they can synergize and feed together as African leadership. We need President Museveni be saying that, but we also need to hear another voice coming from someone from North Africa, from South Africa, so that these voices can be heard. I'm happy that when Uganda passed the anti-homosexual law, I saw Ghana coming in. I've seen other African countries building on that, and that is what we need as Africans, so that we can be identified by what.
Actually, now Uganda is.
Can I pose a joke?
Yeah.
It's amazing that immediately Uganda passes an LGBT law, many African countries start popping up to agree. Interesting that we agree on sex, but we don't agree on war. We don't agree on poverty alleviation. But when the issue of LGBT came into space, everyone said, hey, we too, we support that. I wish we could have that voice economically, that voice in an agricultural space, that voice in our political, synergizing.
That voice in the defense.
So we can not only unite on Black Lives Matter, then all of a sudden, all of us, the whole world of blacks, we agree. But Congo has been in war for the past 100 years. We have not yet agreed.
Yes.
Up to now, we haven't agreed. Yeah. So I think it is also the issue, the problem that the invisible hand that Nduguru Garama talked about, and the one which Rachel talks about, we know that if this man is going to be, like, I've now started bribing these guys who are reading the revolutions in West Africa, giving them some money, so that when they're in power, they will still be with us against the rest of Africa. Now, the weakness of Africa is that maybe because we are too many. Now, not only being too many, but also I have mine, you have yours. But because these guys have realized they have a problem, they cannot survive should Africa unite. Now, can we have something that can bring Africa together to unite?
I think even it goes back to where we started. How come, even when we've had these sparks of brilliance in terms of political leadership, sparks of brilliance in terms of innovation, sparks of brilliance in terms of many other sectors, many other human endeavors, the question becomes, how come we've not been successful in transferring these, our collective experiences, to the next generation? We talked about the issue of connectivity. Why is it that when we have a brilliant Nkrumah or a brilliant Museveni or a brilliant Somaro Machel, why is it that there is no trail, even if it's Mugabe, brilliant fellows in their own time?
Sure.
Why is it that there is no continuity of that brilliance, of that passion, of that ignition? What is the missing link? Is it that people endeavor as individuals and they never connect with those around them? I think that in itself deserves quite a bit of scrutiny.
I saw a comment somewhere that made me laugh. It says, African politics, they don't believe in sharing power without spilling blood.
Sure.
There is a problem there, because by now we could have some continuity coming from Ghana from those days. We should have, Ndugu Mabonga here talked about if a rat was sitting atop the US leadership, the government would run seamlessly. And the same is the case of the so-called Western democracies. In other words, they work tirelessly to infuse their values to the same degree from generation to generation.
You change the leader?
You change the leader,
same. The system.
So much so that whether you bring Obama, who looks like you and me, once he plugs in...
He's the one who killed Gaddafi. It was during Obama.
Once he plugs in, he becomes a white man.
Exactly.
You bring Rishi, who's sitting up top the British system, he's more British than the British. So the question becomes, Paul now, who's the defense secretary, he's darker than all of us here in the US there.
Exactly.
But he's sold on the white man's way of doing things. So this transfer of our passions and our goals is a missing link.
Maybe ultimately we must agree, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe this whole thing of a matrix is real. Like it's at a serious note. When you look at some of these functional governments, how for 15, 20, 30, 100 years, they've set up an agenda here that is rolling from economics to health to what, and things are moving in. Maybe this whole matrix thing is true, that literally we are being moved towards the global village. But my question was, when we get to that village, what will the African be? Because we know what we are.
What it is now, unless we change
We
direction.
know what we are now, and we cannot be talking about a global space in the condition that Africa is right now. Asia is here.
Yes.
USSR is here. And Australia is here. In terms of
The
continents.
Middle East are also working on it.
Yeah. Now you talk to Africa, you have 54, and by the end of next year we might have 55 in
Over a
56
billion.
countries that are breaking away. We, instead of uniting, we're actually creating newer flags every day. There's a country being born every 2 years, every 3 years in Africa. Eritrea the other day, South Sudan the other day. It's fragmentation. And now, because Zulu Natal, the Zulus the other day, they want to break away also and they have their own thing.
In DRC, they're also there.
They're saying the Matabeleland want to break away. So this fragmentation seems to be on a rampage when the world is actually moving towards the global unification. Yes. So maybe we're lagging behind.
Yeah, because this strong man, we are always having a strong man in some place. And the strong man wants to have space. And in Africa, we're having this strong man. We're not looking at these people, what they're doing with their systems, putting their systems in place that even if you had an idiot, like he said, the system will run. Now, that is one of the biggest undoings of Africa. But also, when we look at the unification of Africa, of course, there have been advanced a number of concepts. One is saying, let's unite now. Another one is saying, no, if we unite now, we may not be able to achieve what we want.
What will take from my power.
Yeah. Then let's unite in pieces.
60 years later.
Let's divide as we unite. We go east, we go central, we go south, we go north. But it is also going to take us another time. But also giving time to those who don't want us to unite at all to do that. But this issue of funding, can't we have money on this continent that can help us to run and facilitate our activities? Are we so poor that we have to ask someone for money?
When there is no unity of mind, it really doesn't matter how much is in the pot. The starting point is to have a common reference, indeed a common goal and a common plan. Because when you see these Western nations, if you're talking, whether you're talking about Germany or you're talking about Italy or you're talking about UK, or even any of those major powers, their plan is the same. Maintain dominance at any cost. Whether that dominance, whether the person propagating that theory is speaking Italian, the white men long ago agreed that what brings them together is to dominate and exploit all others. Whether those others are Muslims, whether they are tall, whether they are short, they will be taken advantage of. Whether they're pygmies, it doesn't matter. For us, where's the commonality?
As we wind up, I will come back to Ndugu Maponga, because I can see many people are interested in hearing him.
Comes in. If I could also throw a jab,
okay.
If you could allow. She was asking, what's the problem? Don't we have the money to solve our problems? Gaddafi tried to mobilize Africa, tried to raise funds from Africa for Africans. What happened to him? So the issue is not that we don't have the money. They will not allow you to mobilize. We have the money. We have what it takes. But the colonial master will not allow you. Gaddafi tried to distribute money in Africa. He was actually giving free money to make sure that he takes where Africa needed it to be. He was mobilizing Africa to have one currency. He was mobilizing Africa to have United States of Africa, have one bank. Not IMF, not World Bank. Where is he? The problem is that now, today, like he said, President Museveni is now speaking louder. But why couldn't he speak louder when Gaddafi was alive as well? Why is Ruto now speaking louder, not yesterday? Why is this South Africa, Ramaphosa? Why are they speaking in tongues? It was time for Gaddafi, he spoke. He left. Now it is time for Museveni.
But you know, if there are countries,
why can't we speak in unison?
If there are countries that you cannot agree with, or you may not trust when it comes to African issues, South Africa is one of them. Because you remember when there were even the UN resolution to attack Tripoli, it was South Africa that assigned on the African continent. So I think, like he's saying, this trying to protect a small pond, that you also want to grow a shark. finally you end up also suffocating in it. But the other biggest problem that we can do as Africans is to continue sitting on the fence and waiting for the worst. So I was coming to you, and Joshua, to find a way. What now needs to be done in all this?
Finally,
is African Union going to take us any further? Are these African presidents, these prefects of these small districts, going to move any further than that, other than providing a good market for guns from the West? What needs to be done?
What needs to be done is being done. The mobilization of youth will lead us into an educational program of initiating a revolution that will have no leader. It will happen so fast on the continent as young people are gathering together from country to country. And the battles of their fathers will not be their battles. What needs to be done is simply to declare that borders are not functional. What needs to be done is to say there's one currency that is trading now in Africa. What needs to be done, if you want to sell your goods anywhere in Africa, please proceed. What needs to be done is people putting their money on one bank and call it an African bank or Mansa Musa bank. And there's no more complication. What needs to be done is to make sure that our presidents go on a holiday together and take pictures and say that we are now united. What needs to be done, it's as simple as, what needs to be done is all military bases to select 50,000 from each military base and put them somewhere for training and have one army. What needs to be done is all educational professors sit down together and say, what curriculum can we now write for the 21st century to improve the African children? Those for primary school, write what we need to teach our children, then translate it in various languages, and we start going with one knowledge system that speaks to us. What needs to be done is now we need to start singing our African national anthem. And what needs to be done is that you must look for businesses in South Africa and start breaking until we who are affected. Borders are nothing, man. It's a piece of wire. Like, this thing gets me sad sometimes. It's a piece of wire. In some certain places, it's just a river. There's nothing. It's all in a mind. Sure. How a person who is across the river cannot walk across the other river and he needs a passport. That's the drama. So what needs to be done? We need to stop looking complicated. Stop acting too educated.
In Uganda, for example, we have a good experience because it's with us for a man who has two wives. One wife is living in Kenya, another wife is living in Uganda. So this man in the morning will have breakfast in Uganda, and they will go and sleep in Kenya. And to show that these issues we are talking about are serious, one of the sons was, I think, a vice president in Kenya. Another son of the wife in Uganda was a minister here in Uganda. But if they wanted to go and I want to go and visit my brother in Nairobi, I have to have then because we had to have passports and have to be cleared. But yet we are sleeping in the same compound back at home. So when we say this colonialism is a very strong demon in people's mind, it is real. But until such a time when, I don't know why we cannot even have now the African passport, because we are now having the South African, the ECO saying, and now East African community. But these are things that we need to look at as people of Africa and address them now than tomorrow. You wind up and do Irumba because we're finishing.
No,
here.
I really have nothing much to add apart from once again appreciating the wisdom, the well-nurtured well of wisdom of Bishop Maponga being our guest here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, viewer who has been with us for the last 2 hours. Well, thank you so much, Ndugu Maponga, and we'll continue being with you both here and online whenever, and we'll also thank you for wherever we have called upon you to talk to the people of Africa. You have been able to
and
do
Madam
so.
Also
and thank you.
She added some color to the...
Thank you, Rachel, for joining us for the program, and Ndugu Garama, who, of course, had us at the beginning of this program. Until next week on Friday, we shall shall wish you the best of this weekend. Please stay blessed, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
It's Freaky Friday from Airtel. Buy or gift, buy or gift.
Get freaky too. Dial *100.